Well, hello, friends. I'd like to welcome you to our 5 minute Bible study on the book of Philippians, the fourth chapter, verses 12 and 13. I am your host, Bishop Andy C. Lewter, and this is another one of my online webinars. Let's begin here with this introduction. Philippians, the fourth chapter, verses 12 and 13, is perhaps one of the most popular passages in all of the New Testament. This particular lesson examines the response of the Apostle Paul to an assembly of Christians located in the city of Philippians. Let's go through the text itself, and I'm beginning here with the King James Version. I know both how to be abased and I know how to abound everywhere and in all things. I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. Again, that's the King James Version. I invite you now to consider the New International Version, which reads as follows. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Again, that's the NIV. My personal favorite is the New Living Translation, which reads as follows. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I have learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it is with a full stomach or empty, with plenty or little. For I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. And of course, as always, I always provide you with the Greek translation of the text as well for your own personal edification. Let's look for just a moment at the background and text of this particular passage found in Philippians, the fourth chapter, verses 12 through 13. This particular congregation or church was visited by the Apostle Paul during his second missionary journey. You will recall that Paul had three missionary journeys, and the church that Paul visits here is done during his second missionary journey. This congregation has the bragging rights of being the first congregation in Europe, actually in Macedonia, southern Europe, and it was founded by King Philip II in 356 BC. Obviously, the city was named after its founder, Philip, which is the reason we call it Philippi. It was, however, abandoned by the Ottoman Empire in the 14th century, and while much ruin is left in the city there now, there is somewhat of an urban area that has grown up in its place. As I continue with the background on this text, I would suggest to you that it was written somewhere around the year 62 AD. However, there are a number of scholars who prefer a much earlier date for the writing of this particular epistle, and they place it somewhere between the years of 50 to 60 AD. Now, in terms of context, there is a figure, a personality by the name of Epaphroditus, who the Philippian church sends money to the Apostle Paul in his ministry. Epaphroditus, who is pictured here, was the person who delivered this monetary gift to the Apostle Paul. While visiting the Apostle Paul, he got sick, extended his stay with the Apostle Paul, and when he returned to health, he returned back to the Philippian church with this letter from the Apostle Paul in tow. Now, in terms of the authorship, essentially, the entirety of the academic community agrees that the letter is written by the Apostle Paul. This agreement is based upon the classic style of a Hellenized first century letter. The letter that we call Philippians conforms to a classic Hellenized letter of the first century with its salutations, with its benediction, with all of the reference that we find within the book of Philippians. Now let's go to the text itself. It begins with, I know how to be abased. This word is to be understood in connection with verse 11. Verse 11 says, I am content in all things. And so what we find in verse 12 is a listing of all of the things that the Apostle Paul is content with. Paul has learned to be content in all things. And this should teach us never to fret over wherever we are in life, because God provides us the means and the ability to handle our situation and to survive whatever the situation is in our lives. That reminds me of the story of Adele Gorbanet, who for 4 years was missing, and her brother, when police inquired, said that he believed that she had gone to a nursing home. Being content with that answer, her neighbors saw themselves as helping Adele by doing things around the house. One neighbor took in her mail so that it wouldn't stack up. Another neighbor made sure that her lawn was cut. Another neighbor, when he saw a leaking from the house, called the water company and had the water cut off. Another neighbor made sure that there was no debris around the house. So the house looked quite lived in. However, after 4 years and a foul odor, police were summoned again, and they found Adele in the home. The ME, the medical examiner, explained that Adele had been in the house for a period of 4 years. The lesson to be extracted from this narrative is that while things can look well on the outside, there could be disaster lurking on the inside. Okay, as we close this lesson, we close with the words, I can do all things. I can do all things. Now, the NIV provides the best translation. Paul is talking about the items in verse 12, a listing of those things, being up, being down, being in, being out, having learned how to be content. He is able to do this because of the Spirit of Christ that is within him. The original text has in him rather than through Christ. However, the original writing or the original text, it should be understood, certainly had Jesus in mind. I want to close with this story, and I pray that it blesses you. In the plains of Oklahoma, there was a gentleman by the name of Yates Poole. He was a sheep herder, and while taking care of his sheep, he fell upon rough times and barely had enough to pay the taxes and the upkeep on his sheep farm. Just at the point that he was ready to give up and file bankruptcy, a seismographic team came in and suggested that there may be oil beneath the ground where his property lay. He signed the lease and allowed them to drill, and over 30 wildcat wells was eventually found on the property. Beloved, sometimes there is great treasure just beneath the surface. If you hold on, hold out, God can make a way out of no way. Again, I am Bishop Andy C. Lewter. This has been my 5-minute Bible study for this particular week, examining the text found in Philippians, the 4th chapter, verses 12 through 13. Until next time, God loves you, I love you, and we look forward to seeing you real soon. God bless.